So some of you that were with us before know this. This is Bob, the biology of the brain, and I want to do a little review and preview and expand what we're going to be doing today. All those red funny lines are neurons, and inside your brain you have about 100 billion neurons. 80% of those are in the back of your brain right here, called the cerebellum. And that's where, when that is engaged for an athlete, they are in flow zone. They will say, I had fun, I was focused, I had a lot of energy, but not too much energy, and I could have played this sport forever. The front of your brain right here, this is the prefrontal cortex. This is where thinking takes place. This is where self-talk sits. And what happens is, if you all have an arrow on that screen, if you could follow me along, what happens is inside the prefrontal cortex, you self-talk, and that usually sends an electric stimuli current to either the reward system, which is that blue box, or if it doesn't go to the reward system, the signal goes to the insula, which is the little orange. Either way, both of those release hormones inside the brain. And those hormones go to the amygdala, which is the little brown two humps there, which is where your feelings sit. So if my self-talk is positive and proactive and confident, that reward system lights up, and what gets released is endorphins, dopamine, and oxytocin, all hormones that get you into flow state. If your self-talk is negative before, during, or after you perform, the electric current bypasses the reward system and it turns on the insula. And what gets released from that is cortisol and adrenaline, which equates to negative emotions, which then impacts the way you perform. And so we want to be able to look at and unpack, how does pressure versus stress impact my self-talk, which then drives the way I feel, which then drives the way I perform. So if you go to the next slide, please. I want to unpack and help us understand the difference between pressure and stress. So I am going to have you go back to your small groups, and in just a moment, I'll explain what you're to do, but I want you to acknowledge someone to be the spokesperson for your group. I want you to have about a 3-minute discussion in your group of what do each of you think is the difference between pressure versus stress, okay? So if you go to the next slide, this explains that we want you to first choose a volunteer. Just get that out of the way. Somebody raise their hand and volunteer to be our group speaker. And then how would you answer this question? What is the difference between pressure and stress? We'll give you about 3 minutes for that discussion. So let's hear from a group. How do you define the difference between pressure and stress? Who can give us a summary?
I'll start with group 2.
Thank you, Mary.
We started out with pressure being good and stress being negative, but then after some discussion came out with another scenario in that pressure is the external of what's coming in, stress is how we formulate it inside ourselves. So if we've got negative pressure coming in, we could form negative stress within ourselves. If we have positive pressure coming in, that could be positive stress. Like for example, you get a lot of pressure from a boss. They want you to do all these different assignments that could be challenging. Your internal stress can be positive in that it wants you to do well and step up to the challenge and go forward with it to show that, yes, you can do it, but it's stress to do well.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, how about another group?
I'll be happy to go. We had different opinions with the same, we came to the same kind of conclusion of pressure can be external and an expectation and stress is how you kind of manifest it internally and in your body, and that can cause physical reactions as well. So that kind of idea.
Thank you, Denise. What's the last group?
I guess it's group 3. We didn't go into as much depth as the first group that spoke, but we did talk about how pressure can sometimes be positive. Once it gets to stress, it can turn negative and can have some negative effects on how somebody reacts to it. But yeah, just kind of the positive negative spectrum of pressure versus stress.
So you're all a little close becoming doctors of neuroscience and performance. So let me expand that. So think about this. You know, if you follow the history of stress, people would go to like a doctor and say, I'm stressed out. The doctor would say, take yoga, do meditation, have a glass of wine, go see a therapist, have medication, and that's all doable for dealing with stress. And then what happened was the challenge was, but you haven't dealt with what's causing the stress. You're only dealing with the symptoms. So then there was another rendition, and some of you might have had this before, where you could take a paper pencil test, and they listed about 25 life events, like graduating from college, getting your license, buying your first car, having a baby, getting a partner in life, getting divorced, moving. And they said, check how many of these events have you had in the last year? You went down this lengthy list and you made check marks. Then they said, now count those up. And then depending how many you counted up, they would say, ooh, given that you have 22, you are living a very stressful life. If you have from 10 to 21, you're moderately stressed. Well, the problem with that is what's stressful for you might not be stressful for me. You buy a new house, I buy a new house. I'm feeling good because now I have roots, I have stability. You're feeling negative stress because you don't know if you'll be able to make every mortgage payment. So now you go into the neuroscience field of performance, and where we go is we talk about pressure as this. Pressure is nothing more than everyday life events. That's what pressure is. If it's snowing down in Durango and you're trying to get to the grocery store, there's pressure to drive safely. When Jenny and I were first getting on this call and we had computers shutting down and freezing up, that was pressure. Pressure is nothing more than life events. But when you attach negative emotion to an event, that makes it stress. So stress isn't good or bad. Stress is when you attach a negative emotion to a life event. If you go the next slide, Jenny. And then the next slide, please. Now this gets interesting. So some of you might have heard of the word rumination. Rumination comes from cows. Cows go out in the field, they eat grass, and then they throw up the grass. And that throw up is called cud. And what do? They eat the cud. And they throw that up. And then they eat the cud again, and they throw that up. They do that about 4 to 6 times before they go to a new place for grass to eat. Well, with human performers, rumination is this. It's when you attach negative emotion over and over and over and over again to life events, you are a ruminator. And you all know some athletes that do that. And what happens is, if you go to the next slide, please, when you are a ruminator, the reason it takes you out of flow zone is because if we look at the bottom part of the slide here, when you're ruminating, you're typically ruminating about regret in the past. I should have, you should have, we should have, should. You go to the next slide very quickly, and we'll come back, go to the next slide. I should. I could say that even faster. It sounds like a 4-letter word, and it means the same thing. You should all over yourselves, or you should all over the team. So what happens is you get negative emotion by a past event. And the problem is the event is past. There's not a darn thing you can do about it anymore. But because we are ruminating, then what that leads to is, if you look at the future, the competition tomorrow, the competition later on today, the competition at the state games, now we have anxiety. What if? What if? Maybe not. Oh God, well, last time I was up here, I did this. What if I do the same thing? And when you're either ruminating about the past with regret or the future with anxiety, you cannot be in the present moment. You cannot be in that flow zone state. You're going to be in panic zone or flat zone. Your amygdala, where the feelings are sitting, are being lit up by the insula that is releasing all kinds of cortisol, all kinds of adrenaline. The opposite of ruminating is reflection on the top of this graph. Everybody plays 3 performances when they have a competition. They play the one on the card ride over there and getting ready and get the uniform on. Then they play the actual competition. And then when they go home and go to bed that night, they replay the game. So everybody plays 3 games. And when you reflect, what you're doing is you're looking at your past performance, but from a reflection of, what can I learn from this? What would I want to do the same? What do I want to do different tomorrow when I get into the finals? And you reflect to learn, and that drives you to make a plan of action. Because if you don't like the way you're feeling, you have to take an action. And when you reflect on the past and you learn, what I want to do the same, do different, and you make a plan, then it's very easy to stay in the present moment. All of this rumination is driven by self-talk. You go to the next slide, please. Keep going. I love this quote. Some demands in your environment can help motivate you to perform. Just don't let the demand turn into rumination. And the way we do this is, go to the next slide, please, is you pay attention to self-talk, because self-talk will decide whether you reflect or you ruminate. So at the top of this model where it says self-talk, you have to understand that from the time your athlete wakes up in the morning until they go to bed at night, and this is true for you too, every human being, we are always talking to ourselves. We're always judging and evaluating ourselves. And everything that you say to you about you, everything an athlete says to themselves about you, they record it up here as being very true and real to them. They believe that with their heart and soul. And so that self-talk then builds a self-image. And these are pictures that the athlete carries around in their brain, and it sits either in the reward center or it sits in the insula. And if the experience has passed, it sits in your hippocampus where memories sit. But you carry around this mental photo album. And no matter what anybody else says, you believe what you say up there. It's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to you. So we're going to do a little exercise. In just a moment, I'm going to ask Jenny to switch the slides, and you're going to see a sentence. I would like you to read that sentence to yourself just one time. Please, Jenny, go to the next slide. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, this time when you read the sentence to yourself, I want you to do one thing. I want you to count how many times in that sentence, wherever it is, you find the letter F, like in the word flag. Count up all the F's in that sentence and put that number right up here. Now, again, this is your self-talk. You're reading something and your brain is talking to the rest of your neurons saying, I see this many F's. And this needs to be true for you. I want you to be 100% positive. This is exactly the number of F's in that sentence. This is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So just count one more time before we go to the next part of this exercise. Okay, can you go to the next slide, Jenny, please? So here's what I want you to do, okay? I want you to go around in your group, your small group, and just each one say the number of F's that they found in that sentence. And I guarantee you, you will all have different numbers. And then I want the person that had the lowest number of F's to just share the group. Here's where I saw the 2 F's or the 3 F's or whatever you saw. And then the next highest number, you share the words that you saw the F's, and the next highest number. Jenny, will they be able to have this sentence on their screen as they go to their small groups, or do they need to take a picture of the sentence?
I can copy it and blast it out to everybody.
Okay, let's do that. And then I want you to discuss, and I want you to make sure that at the end of this, everybody in your group agrees to how many F's there are in the sentence. Okay, we're gonna give you about 3 minutes total for this exercise. So Jenny, send them off in their groups, and we'll come back after everybody in your group has the same number of F's.
We have everybody back.
Okay, let's have the group tell me how many F's were there.
7.
Okay, next group.
We all agreed that there were 3 until
Okay.
we saw the thing go back up and then recognized all the ofs in there.
So you ended up with 7?
Mhm.
Well,
Okay.
we didn't see the sentence long enough,
Right.
so we couldn't really
Oh,
count.
okay. Okay, Kathy, thank you. And the last group, did you guys find 7? Anybody from the last?
Most of us agreed on 3,
Yeah,
but one saw 7, and now I'm seeing 7.
yeah. So here's what happens. Let me just first explain, the visual cortex around this. So when we see the word of, we say that in our brain, and the picture, remember we perform by pictures, makes this picture here of the, and so we tend to miss the OFs. So if we go to the next slide, please, Jenny. And the next one. And the next one. So here's what happens. So, people, collectively, you got 7, but if you stayed by yourself, you might make a big bet with me and say, I will name my first child after you, Roberta, but I'm telling you right now, there are only 3 F's. I'm 100% sure. And so what happens is that self-talk creates that picture, which is that self-image, and it's your truth. And then that controls how you perform. When I work with athletes, I often carry around a tape recorder and ask them to do their thinking out loud. And let's say we're doing golf, and at the end of 9 holes, they say, I can't believe how bad my putting is. I say, well, let's turn on the tape recorder and listen to yourself. I'll listen to the way they talk. Oh my God, I cannot make a putt. At this rate, I'm going to have, 16 putts at the end of 9 holes. Why is everything taking me 3 putts? And they're only on the 2nd hole, but they've made decisions about their behavior. So here comes the challenge. I do expect athletes to be hard on themselves. I expect coaches to be hard on athletes. Because think about this, when an athlete is being negative about their performance, what they're really saying is, my body could have done better. That's not a bad thing. The moment an athlete tells me that they have no more negative self-talk, and we're done working together, because then they've accepted this is as good as I'm ever going to get. But what I want to do is I want to train the athlete to talk back to negative self-talk so it rewires to the reward system of the brain. So if you'll go to the next slide, please, I want to teach you a couple techniques. So the first technique says correct negative statements with and statements. Would you right now on a piece of paper write down one negative statement that you say to you with some regularity? God, you're so slow. You're so sloppy. Whatever. Just write down a statement that you have said, you know what, with regularity, here's how I ding myself. And then I want you to write down a statement of thinking about an athlete you work with. What might be a negative statement that he or she says with some regularity that's negative? God, I'll never get it. Why do I keep missing? I'm so uncoordinated. I mean, just write down something that you think of an athlete, of a statement that they say with regularity. And the key is to train yourself or train others to recognize when you have a negative statement, then you say the word and, you never use the word but, because when we say but, we don't believe what follows. It's like the parent that says to the child, What about this C in math? I can't believe you got a C in math. You need to pay more attention to math. But Mom and I are still proud of how you did in geography. You don't believe what follows the but. So the key is to use the word and then to say something short, something inspirational, something about your ability, something about your strength that fires you up. So I could say something like, God, I will never be able to get past first base. And I know if I keep trying, it's going to happen sooner than later. Oh, this coach drives me nuts. And I am learning how to work with a difficult coach. So you have to make sure you believe what follows the and. You don't want it to be Pollyanna. I can't believe that I missed that touchdown. And I do look good in my uniform today. You don't want to make it Pollyanna. It should be about their strength, their ability that's true for them today. So looking at your two statements, would you be willing to think of an and statement that could follow what you said about you, and then write what you might say about that athlete's negative statement and what you might write that's positive after that? So take a moment to do that now, if you would, please. You always want the and statement to have more punch than the negative, so it actually blows up the negative thought. And from a time perspective, to respect your donating time for this Zoom, instead of sending you into small groups, let me just ask a couple of volunteers. Would you either read out loud your negative statement and then follow that with the and statement, either about you or your athlete? Can we get some people to kind of share what they wrote to the whole group?
Sure, my athlete always says, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please.
My athlete always says, my legs are killing me and I'm still running well.
There you go. There you go. Okay, how about another one?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Michael.
I have an athlete. His negativity comes when he does something wrong, and then he basically says, why am I on a team when I'm the best one on this team? Why am I here? And I always comfort him by saying, and we're here to have fun.
Yeah, good. Someone else?
Oh, sure. I have an athlete who was I coach swimming, and he was in lead up events for, I'm going to tell you, maybe 5 years, and came to me, and he'd always go, I've been in lead up forever. I've never been able to swim across the pool. And he has since made it across the pool. So he would always say, I just can't do it. I get too nervous. And I would say, and you have improved enough that you've made it across the pool, and now you're swimming traditional events, because he still goes back to that still.
And you know, sometimes the negativity in our self-talk is not so much dinging us, but building up the other player. When I played college basketball, we played a lot of European teams, and I'm 6'2". During college, I weighed about 185. We played the Russian basketball team, and their woman player was 7'2". She wore a size 21 shoe, and she weighed 235 pounds. And I can tell you, before the game started, I was looking at her, I was going, oh my God, I will never get around or get through her. She's going to kill me. God, if I get hurt, I might not be able to have children. I didn't even have a boyfriend yet, but I was saying all these things. I was giving her lots of power. And my coach pulled me aside and had a conversation with me. And we came up with the statement, and I love pressure. And I love pressure. And I can honestly tell you, folks, at my age now, having to have managed a learning disability and still getting a PhD and working, this statement, I love pressure, if I believed and wanted a tattoo, I would get that tattooed. It works for me every single time. I finally found the gem that works for me. So when your athletes are negative, it's not that they have to have a different and statement all the time, but they got to land on one that works for them, that they buy into. And the more we can get them to use it in their life outside of sports, the more we use it inside of sport. Okay, can you go to the next slide, please, Jenny? So another technique is called dominant thought, and I'll give you the definition and put it in an example for you. It's a nice support technique to the and statement. Dominant thought is this: the very, very last thought the athlete has on their mind before they perform, before they kick the football, roll the bowling ball, jump off the starting blocks, kick the soccer ball, whatever that last thought is, whether it is positive or negative, that will directly impact how well or how poorly they do. So let me put an example to you. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is Clarissa Chu. I worked with her for 2 years. She was the first female wrestler in the weight class of 100 to 115 pounds at age 31, and only being 4'11", won the first medal, a bronze medal for women's wrestling in that weight class in the London Olympics. And without going into detail because of confidentiality, I will tell you what happened. She had to go to Florida to compete against other countries to even qualify to go to the Olympics then in August, in July. And she competed against wrestlers that were much younger than her. Most wrestlers at their best are 24, 26 in their prime. She was 31. Most wrestlers are 5'2", maybe 5'3". She's 4'11". She wrestled in a weight class of 100 and 115 pounds, and you must weigh exactly in that class. So on the day of competition, you must get on the scale. Well, most of her competitors were usually in a sauna or sweat box trying to lose some water weight so they wouldn't be over that 115. What do you think she was doing on the day of competition? She was just trying to make weight. And she competed against 3 countries. The total points they scored on her was 3. The total points she scored on them to then qualify for the Olympics was 43. When she came back, I asked her, what was the last thought on your mind before you started to compete? She says, you know, I went out on the mat, and officials in wrestling will be touching the athlete because they're trying to feel for sweat spots. That's what the referees are doing when they're touching wrestlers before they start. And she said, I will be honest, Roberta, I looked at them and I thought, oh my gosh, they're taller, they're stronger, they're faster, they're quicker, they're bigger. God, I'm in trouble. And then her last thought was she looked up at them, and in attitude inside her head only, her self-talk, she looked at them, she said, I don't even know why you showed up today. She ate them alive. I had a father that I worked with for swimming, with youth swimming, and I was working with his son on some self-confidence issues. And in swimming, as you might know, Diane, you have to have a lot of parent support for volunteers. You've got to do timekeeping on the lanes. You've got to register the kids. It just takes a lot of parent volunteer. And you never want a parent to be timing with the stopwatch their own child competing. But somehow, some way, with all the confusion on the deck, this dad is timing his kid. And in 5th grade, kids come in all different physical sizes. And he jumped off the blocks, and all of a sudden he went to make the turn on the 50 crawl, and he might win the race. We weren't even having goals of winning. We were just having some self-concept goals of learning socialization through swimming. And he makes a flip turn, and he's going to win this race. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I hope that dad doesn't forget to push that stopwatch. And all of a sudden, about 10 yards from the touch, The kid dove underwater, which is an automatic DQ. The father takes a stopwatch and throws it down the deck, and he is screaming, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And the kid jumps out of the shallow end, pulls the goggles up and says, "Look, Dad, I found a quarter." And that father now keeps a quarter taped on the dashboard of his car, in the kitchen, in the bathroom, to remind him it's about the fun for his child. So the words you say to the coach, the words parents say to the coach, it's okay to say, don't go too soon off the blocks, but you have to finish with, wait for the gun. Always finish your picture with what you want them to do, not to do. That will create a whole different pathway with your neuron synapses inside your brain. So let's go back to the last picture here of our brain just to show you some things. So again, we've talked about the reward system, the insula. The last piece I wanted to point out to you was that thing called the hippocampus. Hippocampus is where memories sit. And as soon as we get off this call, this Zoom call is a memory, just like whatever you had for breakfast this morning is a memory. The hippocampus holds every memory, but you get to choose what memories you pay attention to. If you constantly bring up negative memories, that's a form of rumination. And you just keep giving a lot of neuron power to the insula, which is going to light up the amygdala with negative emotions. You get to choose. We all have events that have good and bad endings, but you get to choose how you store them in your hippocampus. So we go to the next slide, please. So this is kind of where we've been. For those of you that have been with me before, you know, we spent these first techniques, 1 through 4 was on the sort of physical resiliency for consistent top performance. And now tonight we looked at language around reflection and planning versus regret and anxiety. Gave you a technique called the and statement and talked about dominant thought. So as kind of a closure to this session, if you go to the next slide, please, I would love for some folks to volunteer. One more slide. Well, there you go. I would like you to volunteer out loud and just repeat this. You know, I came in feeling maybe unsure. I'm leaving feeling motivated. At my best, I pledge to watch my dominant thought that comes out of my mind. Just as a way of closure. Now, if you see that figure to the left there, that is a picture of a rear end, a butt. I would use the word A, but I'm a good Catholic gal and I don't do that. But this is what it's a logo of. It's a butt on the line, meaning take what you learn and put it into action. Don't just talk about it, but do it. If you ever see any of our Olympic Paralympians in the airport, you might see this butt on the line engraved in their sweatsuit on the bottom of their sweatpants because they are about walking the talk. So who could volunteer for us and just share responses to these 3 statements?
I came in feeling nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaving feeling confident. At my best, I pledge to watch my self-talk.
That's great, Mason. Thank you so much. How about someone else?
I'll go. I came in feeling tired. I'm leaving feeling excited. And at my best, I pledge to end all coaching with a dominant thought with my athletes.
That's great. And you know, Denise, I love the honesty about I came in feeling tired. And as I tell athletes, tiredness is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Thank you. Someone else. Okay, I will support your, I will support your silence. If we go to the last slide, please. I'll leave you with this quote. The quote says, if you want to change the way someone else is behaving, first change the way you behave towards them. And that's actually the only thing you can do. And if you ever want to go online, there's a skill building book on mental training drills. You could go on Amazon. As most of you know, you can always do a look inside, and Amazon always picks what they put on look insides, and you can download for free. I think the chapter they put from this manual book was all about imagery. But I appreciate your patience. I hope we didn't hold you for too long in terms of the time commitment. And I will be with you all again in October at your summit in Denver. So if you've been on these calls, please come up and make sure you say hi and let me meet you, and thank you for attending.